70 miles southwest of Pearl Harbor, the ocean looks exactly the way it always does. Flat, indifferent, nothing to mark what's sitting beneath it. But roughly 15,000 feet down, in total darkness, under pressure that would crush an unprotected hull in seconds, there is a battleship. And not just any battleship. This ship survived the attack that dragged America into World War II. It survived 2 atomic bomb tests. It absorbed torpedoes, aerial bombs, and hours of relentless naval gunfire, and still refused to sink. The USS Nevada was one of the most decorated, most indestructible warships in American history. So in July 1948, the US Navy deliberately put it on the bottom of the ocean. Now that decision alone isn't the strange part. The strange part is what they sent down with it. What has never been inspected since, and why this wreck still sits in a kind of unresolved silence that nobody, not the Navy, not the government, seems particularly eager to break. That's what this video is about. And by the end of it, you're going to understand why the most unsinkable ship in American history may have been scuttled for reasons that had nothing to do with the ship at all. Before we start, what part of the world are you in? Drop a comment below and don't forget to subscribe. Nevada is down there right now. That is not a metaphor. A NOAA-affiliated survey confirmed the wreck's approximate location in the deep Pacific, far outside any shipping lane, far beyond any recreational dive. 15,000 feet is deeper than the Titanic. At that depth, no diver reaches it. No submersible visits it routinely. No camera has toured its hull in any publicly documented expedition. It is, for all practical purposes, unreachable and unseen. What makes that remarkable is not just the depth, it is the specific history that went down with it. The Nevada was not a forgotten ship quietly retired from service. It was a Pearl Harbor survivor, a D-Day participant, a vessel that absorbed a nuclear detonation at close range and remained afloat. A ship with that kind of record does not usually end up in an unmarked deep-water grave. The question is not just how it got there. The question is what the decision to put it there actually meant. On December 7th, 1941, every American battleship moored at Pearl Harbor was either sunk, capsized, or badly damaged. Everyone except the Nevada, which did something no other ship that morning managed. It got underway. Under attack, with fires burning and casualties mounting, its crew brought the ship out of Battleship Row and tried to reach open water. Japanese pilots immediately redirected their attention to it. A moving battleship leaving the harbor would have been a serious problem. The Nevada took multiple bomb hits and had to be deliberately beached near the harbor entrance to prevent it from sinking in the channel. The Navy raised it, repaired it, and sent it back to war. It shelled the Normandy coastline on D-Day, 1944. It covered the landings at Iwo Jima. By the end of the war, it had served in both the Atlantic and Pacific theaters. Then, in 1946, the Navy selected it as a target ship for Operation Crossroads, the atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll. It was painted bright orange, so pilots and observers could find it easily. It was placed near the center of the target fleet. It survived both detonations. Surviving the bombs was not a clean outcome. The Able test, an airburst detonation on July 1st, 1946, damaged ships across the target fleet but left most of them floating. The Baker test, an underwater detonation on July 25th, 1946, was worse. The column of irradiated water it threw across the fleet coated everything in radioactive contamination that could not simply be washed off. Navy personnel spent weeks trying to decontaminate the target ships, scrubbing decks with lye, hosing down superstructures, attempting to make vessels that had been bathed in nuclear fallout safe enough to handle. It largely did not work. The contamination had penetrated paint, metal, rope, and every surface it touched. The Navy's own records from the period show that decontamination efforts on most Bikini target vessels were eventually declared inadequate or unsuccessful. For Nevada specifically, radiation readings remained elevated. The sailors assigned to decontamination work were not given protective equipment that would meet any modern standard. Some of them would later file health claims. The Navy faced an uncomfortable reality. It had a fleet of radioactive warships it could not safely crew, could not safely scrap for metal, and could not simply ignore. The obvious answer was disposal. But disposal still had to go somewhere. The Nevada was towed back to Pearl Harbor after Bikini and sat there for nearly 2 years. There was reportedly some discussion of its fate, though detailed records from that period remain incomplete or partially classified. What is confirmed is the outcome. In July 1948, the Navy used the Nevada as a target ship for gunnery and aerial weapons practice off the Hawaiian coast. Aircraft dropped bombs on it. Ships fired at it with naval guns. Aerial torpedoes were launched against it. The Nevada, as it had done throughout its entire existence, refused to go down quickly. It absorbed punishment for hours. Navy records document that the ship proved extraordinarily difficult to sink, which was not an entirely comfortable fact given the circumstances. A submarine finally finished the job with a torpedo. The Nevada slipped beneath the surface and descended to the sea floor. No salvage was planned. No formal ceremony was recorded. It was not preserved as a memorial. It was not sold for scrap, an option that would have been complicated by the contamination question in any case. The Navy had disposed of a Pearl Harbor veteran, an atomic bomb survivor, a ship that had served in 5 major campaigns. It had done so quietly, and it largely moved on. What went to the bottom with Nevada is not fully known. That is not speculation. It is a genuine gap in the documented record. At the time of sinking, the ship almost certainly still contained residual fuel oil. How much is estimated rather than confirmed. It likely contained unexploded ordnance that had not detonated during the target practice phase, and it carried whatever radioactive contamination remained after 2 years of incomplete decontamination efforts. The wreck now sits at a depth where corrosion behaves differently than in shallow water. Cold temperature and reduced oxygen slow the process, but they do not stop it. Steel corrodes. Seams weaken. At some point, hull integrity becomes uncertain. NOAA surveys of comparable deep-water World War II wrecks, vessels sunk in similar circumstances with similar fuel loads, have documented that fuel oil can persist inside sealed compartments for decades, and that corrosion eventually creates pathways for that fuel to escape. Whether Nevada has reached that threshold is unknown, because no one has examined it closely enough to say. The wreck sits below the level where any current technology makes routine inspection practical. At 15,000 feet, remotely operated vehicles can reach it in principle, but no publicly documented mission has surveyed the hull in detail. Nevada's internal condition is, in the most literal sense, a sealed question, and the water above it gives no indication either way. There is another dimension to this that sits alongside the environmental question, and in some ways, it is more uncomfortable. The Nevada had casualties. 60 sailors were killed during the Pearl Harbor attack, according to Navy records for that vessel specifically. Some of those men were never recovered. When the ship was raised and repaired in 1942, not every section of the hull was accessible, and not every remain was accounted for. The ship was returned to service with the knowledge that some of its dead were still inside it. That is not unusual for wartime, but it means the Nevada, when it was deliberately sunk in 1948, was sent to the bottom as a grave as well as a disposal problem. Under US law and Navy policy, sunken military vessels remain the property of the US government and are legally protected from unauthorized disturbance. Nevada has that protection in principle. What it does not have is the formal memorial designation that the USS Arizona carries. The Arizona, which sank at Pearl Harbor and was never raised, is a protected national memorial. Hundreds of thousands of people visit the site every year. The Nevada, which also lost men at Pearl Harbor and which served far longer and further, rests in an unmarked location in deep water with no equivalent recognition. Whether that should change is a question that has been raised and, so far, not resolved. The Nevada was not the only ship the Navy buried this way. Of the roughly 90 vessels present at Bikini Atoll for Operation Crossroads, most were eventually scuttled, sunk as targets, or deliberately disposed of. A small number of the target fleet's fate remains uncertain in the records. The pattern the Nevada represents, decorated warship, contaminated by nuclear testing, quietly disposed of, crew health consequences understated or denied for years, is not unique to one ship. Veterans who participated in bikini decontamination work have sought recognition and compensation for decades. Federal programs to address those claims exist, but remain contested in scope and coverage. What the Navy buried across those years was not just obsolete steel. It was a specific chapter of early nuclear experimentation, and the ships were the most visible part of the evidence. Somewhere in the Pacific, roughly 70 miles from where the Nevada was attacked in 1941, the ship sits in permanent darkness. Its hull is corroding on a timeline no one has measured precisely. Its internal spaces hold things no one has catalogued recently. The men who built it are gone. The men who sailed it are gone. The men who were ordered to scrub radiation from its decks with inadequate equipment are, most of them, gone. The Navy's records from that period are incomplete in ways that may never be fully resolved. The water above the wreck is calm. There is nothing on the surface to indicate what is below. Nevada survived Pearl Harbor. It survived 2 atomic bombs. It survived hours of deliberate bombardment by its own Navy. It is still down there.